Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a storybook, thick, heavy pages, maybe some gold leaf on the cover. You open it, and the words begin, Once upon a time. A princess in a tower, a handsome prince on a white horse, a promise of happily ever after. It's a comforting image, isn't it? A safe harbor from the real world. Now take that image, take that feeling of safety. It's a beautiful, carefully constructed lie, passed down through generations. The stories you think you know, the ones Disney polished until they gleamed, are nothing but the faintest, most sanitized echoes of the originals. The real stories, the ones collected by two German brothers named Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, were not meant to soothe children to sleep. They were meant to keep adults awake at night. They were warnings, whispered in the dark around dying fires in a land ravaged by war, famine, and fear. These weren't tales of magic and romance. They were survival guides for a brutal world, soaked in blood, terror, and a kind of justice, so savage it would make your skin crawl. So get comfortable. Lock your doors, because today we're not reading from the storybook. We're peeling back the pages to reveal. This is the real world of the Brothers Grimm. And trust me, there is no happily ever after here to understand where these stories came from. You have to understand the world that birthed them. We're talking about the early 1800s in the German states. This wasn't a unified, peaceful country. It was a fractured patchwork of kingdoms and duchies reeling from the bloody chaos of the Napoleonic Wars. The land was scarred. Superstition wasn't a quaint belief. It was the law of the land. The forest at the edge of the village wasn't a place for a scenic walk. It was a dark, menacing entity, home to wolves, outlaws, and things far, far worse. In this world, a knock on the door after dark could mean a soldier demanding food, a neighbor driven mad by hunger, or something that didn't have a name. Death was a constant companion. Infant mortality was staggeringly high. Stepmothers weren't just a convenient plot device. They were a common reality in an age where women frequently died in childbirth, and the competition for scarce resources within a family could be a matter of life and death. This is the soil where these tales took root. The Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, weren't jolly old storytellers wandering the countryside. They were brilliant academics, linguists, and cultural preservationists. They saw their German culture being eroded, suppressed by the French occupation. Their project, the collection of these folk tales, was an act of rebellion. It was a desperate attempt to gather the fragments of German oral tradition, the very soul of their people, before it vanished forever. They listened to peasants, to soldiers, to middle-class women who had heard these stories from their nannies and cooks. They collected tales that had been passed down for centuries, morphing and changing with each telling, but always retaining a core of primal fear. And what they found was dark. Not just a little dark. We're talking pitch black, soul-crushing darkness. They found stories of child, and even they, in their quest for authenticity, couldn't stomach it all. The versions they published were edited, toned down. They removed some of the more explicit sexual elements and gruesome violence, trying to make them slightly more palatable for a bourgeois audience. Think about that for a second. The versions we consider dark and disturbing are the face-censored versions. The originals were so much worse. In the version you know, she's a sweet, downtrodden girl abused by her stepfamily. A fairy godmother shows up, whips up a dress and a pumpkin coach, and she goes to the ball. She loses a glass slipper. The prince finds it, and it fits her perfectly. They get married, and maybe the stepsisters get a mild comeuppance, a gentle lesson about being kind. Now, let's talk about the Grimm's version, which they called There's no Bibbidi. Bobbidi Boo. Cinderella's hope comes from a much darker, more pagan place. When her mother was dying, she told her daughter to be good and pious, and that she would look down from heaven and be near her. Cinderella plants a hazel twig on her mother's grave, and she waters it every day with her tears. Her tears, it grows into a magical tree. And when she needs help, she doesn't pray to a godmother. She goes to her mother's grave and weeps, and a little white bird in the tree throws down whatever she needs. The magic is born from grief and devotion. It's primal. When the prince announces the ball, the stepmother gives Cinderella an impossible task to sort a bowl of lentils out of the ashes, she says. If you can do this in 2 hours, you can go. But Cinderella goes to her mother's grave, and the birds of the air come down and help her. She completes the task, but the stepmother just laughs. She gives her an even bigger pile. The birds help again, but it doesn't matter. The stepmother and her daughters mock her, call her filthy, and leave for the ball without her. This isn't just meanness, it is psychological. So Cinderella goes to the tree on her mother's grave and cries out, "Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me." And the bird throws down a magnificent gown of silver and gold, and slippers of pure silk. She goes to the ball, dances with the prince, and vanishes before he can identify her. This happens 3 times. On the 3rd night, as she flees, one of her slippers, not glass, but pure gold in this version, gets stuck. The prince now has his clue. He goes from house to house, declaring he will marry the woman whose foot fits the golden slipper. And this is where the story takes its infamous bloody turn. They arrive at Cinderella's house. The first stepsister takes the slipper into her room to try it on. But her foot is too big, her toe won't. Her words are chilling, a perfect encapsulation of ruthless ambition. "Cut off your toe," she says. "When you are queen, you will have no need to go on foot." The girl, seeing the logic in this, hacks off her own toe, squeezes her bloody foot into the slipper, and hobbles out to the prince. He, none the wiser, puts her on his horse and starts to ride off to the palace. But as they pass the hazel tree on the mother's grave, the 2 little doves that live there cry out, "Rook-de-goo, rook-de-goo, blood's in the shoe. The shoe is too small, the true bride's at home after all." The prince looks down and sees the blood streaming from the slipper. He turns back in disgust. Then it's the second stepsister's turn. Her foot is too wide, the heel won't fit. Again, the mother hands her, "When you are queen, you will have no need to go on foot." The girl slices off part of her own heel, jams her mangled foot into the slipper, and goes out to the prince again. He's fooled, and again, as they pass the grave, the doves expose the lie. The blood gives her away. Finally, the prince asks if there is another daughter. The father, a weak and complicit man, says, "No, there is only a wretched little kitchen, made from my late wife, but she cannot possibly be the bride." The prince insists. Cinderella is brought out, her face and hands grimy with ash. She washes herself, tries on the slipper, and it fits perfectly. But the story doesn't end there. There is no forgiveness. There is no reconciliation. As Cinderella rides to the church with her prince, the 2 stepsisters, desperate to curry favor with the future queen, walk on either side of her, and then justice arrives. From the hazel tree the doves fly down, and as they pass, one of them swoops in and pecks out the right eye of the first stepsister. The other swoops down and pecks out the left eye of the second. And on the way out of the church, they switch. The doves descend again and peck out their remaining eyes, leaving them blind beggars for the rest of their lives. That's the ending, not a lesson in forgiveness. It's a terrifying tale of absolute brutal eye for an eye retribution. It reflects a world where justice wasn't something you got in a courtroom. It was something you took yourself, or that fate delivered in the most gruesome way imaginable. The self-mutilation wasn't fantasy. It was a metaphor for the lengths people would go to for power and status, sacrificing parts of themselves for a prize. And the punishment was a public, horrifying spectacle, a warning to everyone else. If that story made you uncomfortable, let's turn the dial up. Let's talk about Snow White again. You know the Disney version. A vain queen, a magic mirror, a poisoned apple, 7 lovable dwarves, and a handsome prince who wakes her with a kiss. It's a romance. The Grimm's version is a horror story about obsessive cannibalistic narcissism. It begins the same way. The queen, obsessed with her beauty, asks her magic mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall," who in this letter, for years, the mirror answers, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." But one day, when Snow White is 7 years old, the mirror changes its tune. "Queen, you are of beauty rare, but Snow White is 1,000 times more fair." The queen's envy turns into a monstrous pathological hatred. She doesn't just want Snow White gone, she summons her huntsman and gives him a horrifying, "You must kill her. And as proof that she is dead, you must bring me back her lungs and her liver." She wants to eat them. She believes that by consuming the organs of her rival, she can absorb her beauty and power. This is straight out of the darkest, most primitive folklore. It's ritualistic cannibalism. The huntsman, of course, takes pity on the girl and kills a young boar instead, bringing its organs. She, believing them to be Snow White's, has the cook salt them, and the wicked woman ate them and thought she had eaten the lungs and liver of Snow White. The story then proceeds as we know it, with Snow White finding the cottage of the 7 dwarfs. But the queen isn't done. The mirror reveals the truth, and her fury is absolute. And here's another key difference. The queen doesn't just try to kill Snow White once with an apple. She is a relentless hands-on serial killer. First, she disguises herself as an old peddler and comes to the cottage selling stay laces for a corset. She offers to lace Snow White's bodice for her and pulls the laces so tight that Snow White cannot breathe and falls down as if dead. The queen leaves, thinking she's finally succeeded. But the dwarfs come home and cut the laces, and the queen, enraged, tries again this time. She creates a poisoned comb. She disguises herself again, comes to the cottage, and convinces Snow White to let her comb her hair. The moment the poisoned teeth touch her scalp, she collapses. But again, the dwarfs return just in time, find the comb, and remove it. Snow White wakes up. Now the queen is incandescent. She goes to a secret locked room in the castle, a place no one else knows, and using her blackest arts, she crafts the poisoned apple. An apple so cleverly made that only one half, the red half, is poisoned. She disguises herself as a farmer's wife and offers it to Snow White. When Snow White hesitates, the queen takes a bite from the white safe half herself. Reassured, Snow White takes a bite from the red half and immediately falls in, convinced she's dead. They place her in a beautiful glass coffin so they can look upon her face, and they watch over it for a long, long time. And now we come to the prince. He doesn't just stumble upon her. He finds the coffin, is mesmerized by her beauty, and begs the dwarfs to let him have it. He can't live without seeing her. The dwarfs, feeling sorry for him, agree, and here is the biggest lie of the Disney version. The awakening is a clumsy, violent accident. As the prince's servants are carrying the heavy glass coffin back to his castle, one of them stumbles on a root. The jolt is so violent that it dislodges the piece of poisoned apple that was stuck in Snow White's throat. She coughs it up, sits up, and says, "Where am I?" There's no magic, no romance, just a clumsy servant and a lucky bump. But the horror, as with Cinderella, is reserved for the very end. The wicked queen is invited to Snow White's wedding. She consults her mirror one last time, and it tells her the young queen is the fairest. She goes to the wedding, consumed by rage and curiosity, and recognizes Snow White immediately. And then her punishment is delivered. It is not. They had already put a pair of iron shoes on a fire of coals. They were brought in with tongs and set before her. She was forced to step into the red, hot shoes and dance until she dropped down dead. Imagine the scene, the smell of burning flesh filling the wedding hall, the screams of the queen as she is forced to dance in agony, her feet literally cooking in iron blocks until her heart gives out. This isn't it was real. The Grimms were recording a world where justice was a public spectacle designed to inflict the maximum amount of pain and terror as a warning to others. The queen's vanity is punished by the destruction of her body, the very thing she valued most. It's a story that tells you that envy is not a simple flaw, it is a cannibalistic, all-consuming monster, and it will be met with a monstrous end. If you are fascinated by the dark truths hiding in our oldest stories, and if you believe that history is often more terrifying than fiction, then do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next, because we're about to venture even deeper into the woods. Let's talk about 2 children whose names have become synonymous with getting lost, Hansel and Gretel. The story seems 2 children, abandoned in the forest, stumble upon a house made of candy, are captured by a witch who wants to eat them, and then cleverly manage to turn the tables and escape. But what if I told you this story isn't about a witch and a candy house? What if it is a thinly veiled folk memory of one of the most terrifying periods in European history? This story is about famine. Specifically, it likely has its roots in the Great Famine. Years of relentless rain caused widespread crop failures. Starvation became the reality for millions. Society broke down. People ate their own seed grain, their livestock, and then they ate each other. There are documented historical accounts of cannibalism, of parents abandoning their children, or worse, killing them because they simply could not feed them. This is the horrifying reality that underpin. In the very first version the Grimms collected, it was the children's own mother who convinces the father to abandon them in the woods. "We have not enough food to go around," she says. "We must lead them into the thickest part of the forest and leave them. Otherwise, all four of us will starve." The publishers later changed it to a stepmother, because the idea of a real mother doing this was just too monstrous for readers to bear. But the original audience would have understood. The father is heartbroken, but he is weak. He gives in. Hansel, overhearing the plan, gathers white pebbles to mark their trail. The plan works, and they find their way home. But the famine is worse than ever. The mother forces the father to try again. This time, the door is locked, and Hansel can only gather breadcrumbs. The birds of the forest, fellow victims of the famine, they wander for 3 days, starving, until they see a little white bird that leads them to a house. A house built of gingerbread, cake, and candy. In a world defined by starvation, what is the ultimate fantasy? A house you can eat. It's a trap, of course. But it's a trap that preys on the most basic, desperate human need. The witch who lives inside is the personification of the... She isn't just a monster. She represents the ultimate social breakdown, where the old prey on the young, where a person becomes just another source of meat. She fattens Hansel up, feeling his finger every day to see if he's plump enough to eat. Gretel is forced to be her slave. This is the terror of being seen not as a person, but as livestock. But the children of these stories are not helpless victims. They are survivors. Gretel. When the witch prepares the oven and tells Gretel to climb in to check if it's hot enough, Gretel pretends she doesn't understand. "I don't know how," she says, playing the fool. "Show me the witch." Impatient and arrogant, demonstrates, sticking her head into the oven, and in that instant Gretel gives her a shove, sending her all the way in, and slams the heavy iron door shut. The story describes her horrible end in stark detail. Then Gretel ran to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." Then they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there were chests full of pearls and jewels. They return home, rich, to find that their mother has died. The famine, in one form or another, has claimed her. But this isn't a story about magic. It's a brutal fable about resilience. It teaches children that the world is a dangerous place, that even your own parents might betray you when times are hard. That temptation can lead you into a trap, but it also teaches them that you must be clever, you must be resourceful. And sometimes you must be ruthless to survive. The witch in the oven isn't just a monster being defeated. The children don't just survive, they conquer the source of their terror and return with its treasure, ensuring their future security. Now we must go to a place far darker than any we've visited yet. Some of the tales the Grimms collected were so profoundly disturbing that they are rarely ever published in children's collections today, even in their edited forms. One of these is a story called If the other tales have been unsettling, this one is a descent into pure primal horror. It deals with themes of murder within the family, dismemberment, and forced cannibalism. It starts with a devout and happy couple who long for a child. In the winter, the wife is peeling an apple under the juniper tree in their garden, and she cuts her finger. The drops of blood fall on the snow. "Ah," she says, "if only I had a child." 9 months later, she gives birth to a beautiful baby boy, and she is so overcome with joy that she dies. Her husband buries her under the juniper tree. He remarries, and his new wife has a daughter. But this new wife despises her stepson. She sees him as an obstacle to her own daughter inheriting everything. The devil, the story says, fills her mind with wicked thoughts. She abuses the boy. One day her daughter, Marlinchin, asks for an apple. The stepmother leads her to a large chest where the apples are stored. She gives Marlinchen an apple, and just then the little boy comes in and asks for one too. The stepmother's face darkens. "Yes, my son," she says, her voice like poison, "come here." She tells him to pick an apple from the chest, and as the little boy leans over, the boy's head is severed from his body, and it falls among the red apples. The stepmother is seized by a moment of panic. What has she done? But her wickedness quickly returns. She props the boy's body up on a chair, puts his head back on his neck, and wraps a scarf around it to hide the wound. She places an apple in his hand. When her daughter Marlinchen comes in, the stepmother tells her to go ask her brother for the apple. When he doesn't answer, her mother tells her to slap him in the face. Marlinchen does, and the boy's head tumbles to the floor. The girl is hysterical, screaming that she has killed her brother. The stepmother calms her down. "Hush," she says. "We will tell no one. We will make him into a stew." She then dismembers the body of her stepson, puts the pieces in a pot, and cooks him into a black pudding. The stepmother replies that he has gone to visit his great-uncle. Then she serves him the stew. The father is ravenous. He eats bowl after bowl, declaring it the most delicious thing he has ever tasted. He eats the entire thing, throwing the bones under the table. He has no idea that he has just consumed his own son. Marlinchen, weeping, gathers all the little bones from under the table, ties them in her silk. She lays them under the juniper tree. As she does, a mist rises from the tree. A fire seems to burn within it, and out of the fire flies a beautiful bird. The bird begins to sing a song that tells the whole horrifying story. "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister, Marlinchen, gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken handkerchief, laid Kee-wit, what a beautiful bird am I." The bird flies through the town singing its song. It sings for a goldsmith, who gives it a golden chain. It sings for a shoemaker, who gives it a pair of red shoes. It sings for a miller, who gives it a heavy millstone. Then it flies back to the house. The father feels a strange sense of joy. The stepmother is filled with a dreadful... The bird lands on the roof and sings its song. It drops the golden chain down the chimney for the father. It drops the red shoes for Marlinchen, and then the stepmother runs outside, her hair standing on end, and the bird drops the millstone directly on her head, crushing her flat into the ground. At that moment, the boy, whole and alive again, emerges from the smoke and flames where his stepmother died. This story is a Freudian nightmare. It's a raw, unfiltered expression of the anxieties of blended families, of sibling rivalry, and the deepest, most unspeakable taboos. The act of the father eating his son is a horror that transcends simple violence, and the retribution, once again, is absolute and supernatural. The child is reborn not through forgiveness. This tale was a warning, a dark lesson about the evil that can lurk within the four walls of a home. We've seen brutal justice and cannibalistic jealousy. Let's look at a story that deals with a different kind of horror, prolonged suffering, and the consequences of a rash promise. Let's talk about Rapunzel. The Disney version, Tangled, is an adventure story about a plucky princess with magical hair. The original is a much bleaker tale about imprisonment, shame, and despair. It begins with a couple who live next door to a powerful sorceress named Dame Gothel. The wife is pregnant, and she develops an overwhelming craving for the Rapunzel, a type of lettuce growing in the enchantress's garden. Her craving is so intense she believes she will die without it. Her husband, terrified of losing her, sneaks into the garden twice to steal some for her. On the third night, Dame Gothel catches him. She agrees to let him live and take all the Rapunzel he wants, but on one condition: when the child is born, he must give it to her. The man, in his terror, agrees. When a baby girl is born, the enchantress appears, names her Rapunzel, and takes her away. When Rapunzel turns 12, the enchantress locks her in a tower in the middle of a forest. The tower has no doors and no stairs, only a single window at the very top. When Dame Gothel wants to visit, she stands at the bottom and calls out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel, who has magnificent long hair as fine as spun gold, would unpin her braids, wrap them around a window hook, and let them fall 20 ells to the ground for the sorceress to climb. This goes on for years. Rapunzel is a prisoner, completely isolated from the world. One day, a prince is riding through the forest and hears her singing. He's enchanted by her voice, but can find no way in. He returns every day to listen, until one evening he sees Dame Gothel arrive and hears her call. He learns the secret. The next night he comes to the tower and mimics the call. Rapunzel lets down her hair, and for the first time she sees a man other than her captor. He proposes marriage, and she agrees. They devise a plan for her escape. Every time he visits, he will bring a skein of silk. And this is where the early Grimm versions get particularly interesting. This isn't a chaste courtship. They are lovers, and Rapunzel, naive and innocent of the ways of the world, makes a fatal mistake one day. As Dame Gothel is climbing her hair, Rapunzel says, without thinking, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how is it that you are so much heavier to pull up than the young king's son? He is with me in a moment." The enchantress is stunned into silence, and then her fury explodes. "Oh, you wicked child," she screams. "What do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In a rage, she grabs a pair of scissors. Snip, snap, the beautiful golden braids fall to the floor. She then takes the poor girl and casts her out into a desolate wilderness, a desert, to fend for herself in misery and want. But her revenge is not complete. That evening she takes the severed braids and ties them to the window hook. When the prince comes and calls, she lets them down. The prince climbs up, but instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he finds the terrifying, gloating face of the enchantress. You would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer in the nest and sings no more. The cat has got it and will scratch out your eyes as well. For you, Rapunzel is lost. You will never see her again. The prince is so consumed by grief and despair that he leaps from the top of the tower. He survives the fall, but he lands in a thicket of thorns below, and they pierce his eyes, blinding him. His punishment is not death, but a living hell. He wanders for years as a blind beggar, eating nothing but roots and berries, weeping and lamenting the loss of his bride. This isn't a brief period of sadness. It is years of agonizing, sightless wandering through the wilderness. Finally, after a long, long time, he stumbles into the same desolate region where Rapunzel was cast out. One day, he hears a familiar, beautiful voice singing. He follows the sound, and Rapunzel recognizes him. They fall into each other's arms, weeping, and as her tears fall onto his face, 2 of them wet his eyes. His sight is miraculously restored. He leads her and their children back to his kingdom, where they are received with joy. But that